Asterisk. The snowstorm screamed across the frozen valley like a living beast, its icy breath biting every inch of exposed skin. Liara, a young alien mother with silver blue skin, pushed forward through the endless white, holding her baby tightly against her chest. Her steps were slow, weak, and shaky, as if each movement drained the last bit of life left inside her. The wind tore at her clothes, the cold burned her lungs, and yet she kept moving. Because stopping meant death, her tiny child let out a soft whimper, barely strong enough to cry. And Lyra's heart twisted with fear. She bent her head and began to hum a soft lullaby, a song from her homeworld. A song every mother sang to her baby when danger came. The melody floated weakly into the storm, almost disappearing before it reached her child's ears. But the lullaby kept the little one calm, and that gave Liara the courage to take one more step, then another. Behind her in the distance, red lights flashed through the snow, belonging to the soldiers who hunted her. She did not know how many were left or how close they were, but she knew one thing clearly. They wanted her baby, not her life, but the child in her arms. And that truth filled her with terror deeper than the storm's bite. She stumbled toward a dark shape ahead, half buried under snow, an old abandoned outpost from some forgotten war. The metal door was frozen, but she pushed it open with trembling hands, slipping inside before the storm swallowed her whole. The inside was cold, silent, and empty, with broken lights hanging from the ceiling and metal crates scattered on the floor, but at least the wind could not reach her baby here. She found a corner behind a large crate and sat down, her legs shaking from exhaustion. She wrapped the thin blanket around her child and held the baby tightly against her heart. Her own fingers were numb and painful, but she did not care about herself anymore, only the small life she carried. Lyra's breath came out in thin white clouds as she began singing the lullaby again. Slow and soft, with a voice that cracked from cold and fear. Her vision blurred as exhaustion pressed down on her like a heavy stone, her body screaming for rest. She knew she could not stay awake much longer. She had pushed herself beyond her limit, but she sang anyway, whispering the lullaby's final line, a promise that no matter what happened, a mother's heart would protect her child forever. Her song faded into silence, and for a moment, the world felt completely still. Then, a sound, a crunch, footsteps, steady and heavy, moving slowly through the thick snow outside the outpost. Liara froze, her breath caught in her chest, her heart pounding like a drum. Was it the soldiers? Had they found her again? Would they break down the door and take her baby away? She pulled her child closer, her hands shaking, her mind racing. The footsteps came closer, each step echoing through the metal walls of the outpost. She heard the wind push the door slightly, letting in a sharp gust of cold air. A shadow appeared in the doorway, tall, solid, unfamiliar. Her fear rose like a wave, ready to crash over her. She pressed her back against the crate, trying to shield her baby with her body. The shadow moved, stepping fully inside, and the light from the storm revealed something she did not expect. It was a human, a man covered in thick winter gear. Snow melting on his shoulders and hood, his face tired but alert. He blinked, confused to see someone there, then slowly raised his hands to show he meant no harm. Liara did not know whether to trust him or scream. The human took a careful step forward, studying her with wide eyes as if he had never seen someone so fragile and cold. Then he noticed the baby in her arms, wrapped in a thin blanket, barely breathing. His expression changed, softening with concern instead of fear. He knelt down, slowly so he would not frighten her, and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his breath fogging the air. "I heard crying in the storm. I followed the sound." Liara did not answer. She was too weak and too scared. The human looked around the cold, abandoned outpost, then back at her shivering hands, and he realized the truth. If he walked away now, the mother and her baby would not survive the night. He took off his thick jacket and placed it on the ground in front of her, gently pushing it toward her as a sign of peace. "You're freezing," he said softly. "Let me help you." Liara stared at the jacket, then at the human, then at her child. Her heart pounded with fear, but also with a desperate hope she had not felt in many hours. If this human was kind, if he truly wanted to help, maybe her baby still had a chance to live. She slowly reached out her trembling hand and touched the edge of the jacket. The human smiled gently, and at that moment, the entire fate of the night changed. The storm still roared outside. The soldiers still searched for her. The world was still dangerous and cold. But here, inside this forgotten outpost, a human's footsteps had brought something she thought she would never feel again: hope. The human man moved slowly, making sure his every action was calm and gentle. Liara's eyes followed him with fear and exhaustion, her arms tightening around her baby as if the child were her last piece of life. The human kept his hands visible, showing he carried no weapon, only concern. He placed his thick winter jacket closer to her, pushing it across the cold metal floor so she wouldn't feel threatened. Liara hesitated, trembling, unsure if she could trust him, but the warmth slipping from her baby's tiny body terrified her more than the human stranger. With shaking fingers, she picked up the heavy jacket and wrapped it around her child. Feeling the warmth almost instantly, the baby made a weak sound, half cry, half breath, and the human's face softened with relief. "My name is Evan," the man said quietly, kneeling a short distance away so she wouldn't panic. His voice was deep but gentle, like someone trying to comfort a frightened animal. Liara swallowed hard, her throat dry and aching from the cold. She didn't know if she should speak. She didn't know if he would understand her language, but she tried, whispering her name in a barely audible tone. "Liara," she said, the word escaping like a broken breath. Evan nodded slowly, repeating her name with respect, not mocking or mispronouncing it. He noticed the bruises on her arms, the frostbite forming on her fingers, the way she kept glancing at the door as if expecting danger to burst through it. Something or someone had been chasing her. "Are you running from someone?" he asked softly, but Liara looked down instead of answering. Her silence told him enough. She didn't trust him yet, but she trusted the warmth of his jacket around her baby. That was a start. Evan stood up and looked around the abandoned outpost, checking if there was anything he could use: metal crates, broken tools, frozen pipes, nothing useful for warmth or safety. The storm outside roared louder, shaking the metal walls, making the entire outpost groan like it was about to collapse. "We can't stay here," Evan said, his voice steady but urgent. "The storm will get worse." Lyra's heart squeezed. In fear, she was too weak to walk, and the idea of going back into the storm terrified her. Sensing her panic, Evan raised one hand gently. "I have a shelter not far from here," he explained. "It's safe, it's warm, and there are people who can help your baby." Liara looked up sharply, her eyes wide with fear and hope mixed together. But then she remembered the soldiers chasing her, the danger following her every step. She shook her head weakly, trying to say she couldn't go. She couldn't bring danger to anyone else. Evan understood her fear without her speaking. "You're not alone out here anymore," he said quietly. "Let me help you." Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from the outside engines, several of them, approaching fast. Evan stiffened instantly, his survival instincts kicking in. Lyra's breath caught in her throat, terror flashing across her eyes as she recognized the sound. The soldiers, they had found her again, faster than she expected. Evan acted quickly, grabbing a large metal crate and pushing it toward the door as a makeshift block. The outpost door rattled violently, as if someone outside was testing it. Liara held her baby tightly, whispering her lullaby with trembling lips, trying to calm the child and herself. Evan turned to her, his voice sharp but gentle. "Listen," he whispered. "I don't know who they are, but they're not here for me. They're here for you." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, the truth too heavy to deny. The door banged. Again, louder this time, and a commanding voice shouted something in a harsh alien language. Liara flinched at the sound, recognizing the tone of the hunters who wanted her child. Evan took a deep breath, making a decision that would change everything. He moved to a hidden compartment, built under the floor panels. Something only someone who lived in this region would know existed. He pulled it open, revealing a small dark space just big enough for Liara and her child. "Get inside," he whispered. "They won't find you here." Liara shook her head, fear gripping her throat. "If they see you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Evan cut her off gently. "I'll be fine," he said. "I look like a simple scavenger. They won't see me as a threat." The door shook again, the metal frame bending under force. There was no more time. Evan helped Liara down into the compartment, placing the jacket over her and the baby. Liara grabbed his hand for a second, her eyes begging him not to risk himself. But he only nodded, lowering the panel and sealing it carefully. Darkness surrounded her, but she kept her baby close, listening to the growing footsteps above her head. The outpost door finally burst open. Boots stormed inside, voices shouting, weapons clicking. Liara closed her eyes in terror. Evan's voice echoed across the room, calm but firm, as he faced the soldiers alone. And in that moment, Liara understood something powerful. This human was willing to stand between her and danger without even knowing her story, without knowing her past, without knowing her name until minutes ago. It was a kind of bravery she had never seen before. And it made her believe, for the first time in a long time, that maybe she and her baby still had a chance. Asterisk. The sound of metal boots striking the floor echoed through the abandoned outpost like thunder. Liara held her breath inside the dark compartment, clutching her baby so close that she could feel every tiny heartbeat. The child whimpered softly, and she gently pressed her hand over the baby's mouth, praying the soldiers would not hear. Above her head, Evan stood alone in the center of the outpost, facing the armed strangers with nothing but courage and a calm voice. The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, his armor glowing with cold blue lights, his helmet hiding his face completely. He scanned the outpost with sharp robotic eyes, like a predator searching for hidden prey. Evan kept his expression blank, as if he were just a lonely wanderer taking shelter from the storm. One soldier moved toward a pile of crates, kicking them aside roughly. Liara felt every sound in her bones, fighting the urge to scream. She kept her body curled over her baby, protecting the child with all she had left. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure they would hear it. The leader's voice cut through the silence, translated perfectly by his suit. "You human," he said coldly. "We detected heat signatures nearby." Evan didn't flinch. "I've been here for an hour," he replied calmly. "It's freezing out there. Anyone would come in to escape the storm." The leader stared at him for a long moment, trying to judge whether he was lying. Evan's face remained stone still, his breathing steady, his hands empty. He looked like a harmless traveler, exactly what he wanted them to believe. Another soldier walked to the far corner, right above the hidden compartment. Liara's throat tightened in terror as she heard the heavy footsteps inches from her head. She gently rocked her baby in the dark, humming the lullaby inside her mind, not daring to make a sound. The soldier paused as if sensing something. The air felt heavy, thick, dangerous. Liara kept her eyes squeezed shut, tears slipping down her cold skin. Then the soldier turned away, unaware of the lives hidden just beneath his feet. Evan quietly released a breath, grateful for a few seconds of safety. The leader stepped closer to him, towering over him like a giant shadow. "Have you seen an alien woman carrying a child?" the leader asked. "We know she passed through this area." Evan shook his head. "No one here but me," he answered simply. The leader leaned in slightly. "She is dangerous," he lied, "and the child is infected with a deadly energy." Evan's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I don't want trouble," he replied. "Take what you need and go." The soldiers exchanged glances, unsure whether to believe him. Outside, the storm howled even louder, making it harder for them to track their target. Finally, the leader motioned to his men, "Search the area." He ordered, "But be quick." Boots thundered through the outpost, smashing open crates, scanning walls, overturning old containers. Liara held her baby as still as a statue, praying in silence. Her mind flashed with memories of her escape. The people she lost. The reason she could not be captured again. Her child was not sick. Her child was not dangerous. Her child was important. Too important. And that was exactly why these soldiers wanted her. One soldier found Evan's bag and opened it roughly, spilling old tools and food packets on the ground. "Where are you coming from?" One asked harshly. "North Woods," Evan replied calmly. "I scavenge old tech from the ruins." The soldier grunted, unimpressed, and moved on. Minutes passed like hours. Every crash made Liara flinch. Every footstep made her heart jump. Her baby stirred weakly, and she whispered a soft breath into the tiny ear. "Please, little one, stay quiet," she begged within her heart. Finally, the leader spoke again, sounding impatient. "We move," he ordered. "The storm will erase track soon, but we'll find her." Evan remained still as the soldiers began to leave. One by one, they filed out the door, disappearing into the blinding snowstorm. Only the leader remained for a moment longer, staring at Evan as if sensing something. His cold blue visor reflected Evan's face, calm, brave, unbroken. "If you see them," the leader said, "you will report it." Evan nodded slowly. "If I see anything," he replied. "You'll be the first to know," the leader said. Nothing else, and finally stepped outside. The outpost door slammed shut, and the sound of engines faded into the snowy distance. Silence, a deep, heavy silence filled the outpost. Evan waited several more seconds, making sure they were truly gone. Then he hurried to the hidden compartment and pulled the panel open. Liara looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes, her baby barely conscious in her arms. "You're safe now," Evan whispered, offering his hand to help her climb out. She took it, her fingers cold and trembling. When she stood, her legs shook so much she almost fell. Evan caught her gently, steadying her with warm, strong hands. "They'll be back," he said in a low voice. "And next time, they'll search deeper." Lyra's fear returned instantly. "We must go," Evan continued, his voice firm but kind. "Now, before the storm clears." He reached for his pack, grabbed extra cloth to wrap around the baby, and looked into Lyra's eyes with determination. "I don't know your story," he said, "but I won't let them take your child." For the first time in a long time, Liara felt something warm inside her chest. Not fire, not fear, hope. The moment the soldiers' engines faded into the storm, Evan moved quickly, his body full of urgency. "We don't have much time," he said, tightening the straps on his old travel pack. Liara held her baby close, her arms weak but determined. Her eyes filled with fear and confusion. She had never trusted a human before, yet now she depended on one for survival. Evan guided her toward the back of the outpost, where a broken metal door led to the open snowfields. The wind outside roared like a wild beast, throwing icy flakes against their faces. Liara instinctively stepped back, afraid the storm would take her child from her arms. Evan turned to her, his voice steady and gentle. "I know it's cold," he said, "but staying here is more dangerous." He removed his scarf and wrapped it around her shoulders, then tightened his jacket around the baby. Liara felt warmth return to the child's tiny body, and she whispered a silent thank you. Evan nodded once, then pointed to a low ridge in the distance, barely visible through the blinding snow. "My shelter is past that ridge," he explained. "If we move fast, we can reach it before the soldiers." "Circle back." Liara swallowed her fear and stepped outside, her legs trembling, her body already exhausted from hours of fleeing. The snow swallowed her feet with every step, slowing her down, but she refused to fall. Evan walked beside her, his hand lightly touching her back to steady her. Each step was a battle, every breath painful. But Liara kept going because her baby's life depended on it. The snowfield stretched endlessly, glowing pale under the storm clouds. Evan led the way, guiding Liara around deep snow pits and old metal wreckage from a forgotten war. He knew this land well, every hidden danger, every possible shelter, but even he felt the weight of the storm, the biting wind cutting through his gloves. Behind them, the outpost slowly disappeared. Swallowed by the falling snow, after several minutes, Lyra's strength began to fade. Her feet dragged, her arms felt like stone, and her vision blurred at the edges. She stumbled suddenly, falling to her knees as her baby whimpered in fear. Evan rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. "You can't stop," he said, desperately. "You'll freeze out here." Liara looked at him with tear-filled eyes. I can't," she whispered, her voice breaking. Evan shook his head firmly. "Yes, you can," he said, "and I'm not letting you fall." He gently lifted her baby, wrapping the child securely against his own chest, the warmth from his body helped the tiny one stop shaking. Then he offered Liara his hand, pulling her back onto her feet. He supported her weight with his arm, letting her lean heavily against him. With slow but steady steps, they continued forward. The snowstorm suddenly shifted, the wind changing direction with a sharp howl. Evan paused, his eyes narrowing. He knew that sound, engines closer than before. "They're coming back," he said urgently. Liara's heart dropped, cold terror shooting through her body. She looked over her shoulder and saw faint lights moving through the snow soldier scouts, returning faster than expected. Evan grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a line of jagged rocks ahead. "We hide there," he shouted, his voice nearly lost in the wind. They sprinted as fast as Lyra's weak body allowed, their feet sinking deep into the snow. The rocks were only a few meters away, but the engines grew louder behind them. Liara felt panic rising, like fire in her chest. If the soldiers caught them now, everything would be over. Her baby would be taken. She would be dragged away, and Evan. She couldn't even imagine what they would do to him. They reached the rocks just in time. Evan pushed Liara behind a large stone slab and crouched beside her, shielding the baby with his arms. Snow swirled violently around them, covering their tracks. The soldiers' lights swept across the snowfield, flashing dangerously close to their hiding spot. Liara held her breath, her fingers digging into Evan's sleeve. He glanced at her, giving a small reassuring nod. He wasn't afraid for himself, he was afraid for them. The engines slowed, hovering nearby as the soldiers searched again. One beam of light passed so close that it illuminated Evan's face for a split second. But the storm thickened again, blurring everything, hiding them in a curtain of white. After several tense minutes, the engines roared away, heading in another direction. Liara finally let out a trembling breath, her body shaking with relief and fear. "We have to move now," Evan whispered, "before they return again." He helped her stand, then handed her baby back with great care. Liara looked at him, overwhelmed. "You risk your life for us," she whispered softly. Evan gave her a tired but gentle smile. "Some things are worth risking for," he said simply, with renewed determination. They set off again, pushing through the storm together, step by step, breath by breath. They moved toward the hidden shelter beyond the ridge. Lyra's fear remained, but now it was mixed with something new, trust. The storm finally began to soften as they neared the ridge, the wind no longer screaming like a wild creature, but whispering through the frozen air. Evan led Liara along a narrow path between tall ice pillars, his steps careful, his eyes scanning for danger. Liara walked close behind him, her baby held tightly against her chest. The child's breathing was weak but steady now. Warmed by the cloth and blankets Evan had wrapped around her, still, Liara could feel how fragile the little body was, and every breath felt like a countdown she could not stop. After nearly half an hour of slow, painful walking, Evan pointed toward a dark shape ahead, a large metal door built into the side of the ridge, barely visible under layers of snow and frost. "That's it," he said softly. My shelter. Liara stared at it in disbelief. It didn't look like much from the outside, but to her it was a miracle, a place where her baby might survive the night. Evan brushed off the frozen control panel and typed in a code with stiff fingers. The heavy door slid open with a deep metallic groan. Warm air flowing out like a breath of life. Liara stepped inside and gasped softly. The shelter was small but cozy, lit by soft yellow lights. With metal walls that hummed gently from the heating system, there were blankets, food packs, water filters, and even a medical station tucked in the corner. It was more comfort than she had seen in days, maybe even years. Evan quickly shut the door behind them, sealing out the storm. "You're safe now," he said quietly, guiding her to a small bed near the heater. Liara sat down slowly, feeling the warmth soak into her frozen skin. Her baby stirred weakly, letting out a tiny cry, not from fear, but from warmth returning to her body. Evan hurried to the medical corner and grabbed a small scanner from the wall. "I need to check the baby," he said gently. "She's very cold." Liara hesitated, her arms tightening around her child. Her eyes held fear, deep fear, more than Evan expected. He recognized that look, fear not of the cold, but of secrets. "Liara," he said softly, "I won't hurt her." She looked at him for a long moment, then slowly loosened her grip, allowing him to place the scanner near the baby's chest. The scanner beeped and projected a soft blue hologram, showing the baby's heart, temperature, and internal energy patterns. Evan frowned, confused. The baby's heart was beating weakly. Her body temperature dangerously low, nothing unusual considering the storm. But then he saw something else, something glowing inside the child's small chest, a bright core of shimmering energy, pulsing gently like a tiny star. Evan's breath caught, the hologram reflecting in his wide eyes. Liara looked away, tears forming. "This energy," Evan whispered. "What is it?" Liara closed her eyes, her voice shaking. "She was born with it," she whispered. She didn't ask for it." Evan looked at her carefully, sensing something huge behind her trembling words. "Liara," he said softly, "please tell me the truth." She took a long breath, holding her baby tight. "For many cycles," she began slowly, "my people lived under a great council." Her eyes darkened with pain. "They wanted power, more power than our world could give." Her fingers brushed her baby's cheek gently. "So they searched for children born with rare energy in their blood." Evan felt cold, despite the warmth of the shelter. "And your baby?" he asked quietly. Liara nodded, tears slipping from her eyes. "She has the purest form of that energy," she said in a trembling voice. "The kind only one in 1,000 generations can carry." Evan's breath froze in his chest. "So, the soldiers?" Liara looked up, her eyes shining with grief and fear. "They want to control her," she whispered. "If they take her, they will use her to claim power over every planet near our region." Evan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the weight of her words. He had expected danger, yes, but not something like this. Not a baby who carried a light powerful enough to change worlds. He looked at the child again, at the small body wrapped in blankets, at the soft glow hidden beneath her skin. "She's just a baby," he whispered. "How can they do this to her?" Liara shook her head, her voice soft with heartbreak. "They do not see her as a child," she whispered. "They see her as a weapon." The words sank deep into Evan's heart, filling him with anger, pure, fierce anger. He walked to the door of the shelter and checked the security locks again, making sure everything was sealed tight. "They won't get her," he said firmly. "Not while I'm here." Liara looked at him with surprise. "You don't know us," she whispered. "You don't owe us anything." Evan turned toward her, his eyes steady and deep. "No," he said gently, "but you're a mother trying to save her baby, and that is something worth fighting for." Liara covered her mouth with her hand, unable to stop the tears. She had lost her home, her family, her safety, yet here, in a small human shelter in the middle of a storm, she felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope, Asterisk. The shelter hummed softly with warm air, but the peace inside it felt fragile, like thin glass that could break with one wrong sound. Evan checked every lock, every vent, every weak corner of the metal room, his movements fast but careful. Liara sat on the bed with her baby wrapped in layers of blankets, feeling warmth return slowly to the tiny body. For the first time since her escape began, the child's breathing grew stronger, the tiny fingers curling gently around Lyra's hand, but fear still lived inside Lyra's heart, heavy like a weight she could not lift. Evan finished securing the shelter and walked back to her, his clothes dusty with frost, his face tense with worry. "They will come," he said quietly. "Soldiers never leave a trail unfinished." Liara lowered her eyes, unable to meet his gaze. "I brought danger to your home," she whispered. "I had no right." Evan shook his head firmly. "I opened the door to you," he said, "and I do it again." Before she could answer, the ground shook with a low rumble, the metal walls vibrated, the lights flickered, and a deep engine roar echoed from outside the ridge. Lyra's breath caught, fear freezing her spine. "They found us," she whispered. Evan grabbed his winter coat and walked to the weapons locker near the door, pulling out an old plasma tool he'd modified into a defensive weapon. It wasn't much, but it was enough to protect a mother and child. "I'll try to hold them off," he said, his voice calm despite the danger. Liara stood quickly, holding the baby close. "No," she said with shaking voice. "They are many." Evan gave her a small, tired smile. "Doesn't matter," he said softly. "I just need to slow them down." A loud metallic impact struck the outside of the shelter, shaking dust from the ceiling. The baby whimpered, and Liara rocked her gently, singing the lullaby again in a trembling whisper. This time, the lullaby felt different. It wasn't a song of sadness, but a shield. A desperate promise that she would never stop fighting for her child. Outside, voices shouted commands, the soldiers' language sharp and cruel. Then came the grinding sound of cutting tools against the shelter door. "They're trying to break in," Evan said, gripping his weapon tighter. Liara stepped closer to him, her eyes full of fear and determination. "Why do you help us?" she asked softly. "You could run, hide, survive alone." Evan looked at her as if the answer was simple, almost obvious. "No one deserves to be hunted like this," he said, "especially not a child." The cutting sparks grew brighter through the cracks in the door. Evan positioned himself behind a metal crate for cover. Liara stood at the far end of the room, holding her baby close, her heart racing like a storm inside her chest. The door finally gave way with a thunderous crash. Cold air rushed in as 3 armored soldiers stepped through the opening. Weapons raised, scanners glowing. Their leader, the same one from the outpost, walked in behind them, his blue visor reflecting the dim shelter lights. Evan didn't wait. He fired his plasma tool, a burst of bright energy flying across the room, striking one soldier and throwing him backward. The other 2 reacted instantly, firing stun beams toward Evan's cover. The crate shook violently under the attack, sparks flying everywhere. Liara pressed her baby close, her breath trembling, her heart tearing with every sound of the fight. Evan ducked, rolled to the side, and fired again, hitting the second soldier in the leg and forcing him to collapse. The leader stepped forward calmly, raising his weapon. "You cannot protect her," the leader said coldly. "The child belongs to us." Evan gritted his teeth. "She's not a thing," he shouted. "She's a child." He fired again, but the leader deflected the shot with an energy shield built into his armor. The force threw Evan backward, slamming him against the wall. Liara gasped, her voice breaking. "Evan!" The leader turned toward her, scanning her. "Baby with a cold blue beam." "The air," he said. "Bring her." 2 soldiers moved toward Liara, their steps heavy and unstoppable. Liara stepped back, her legs shaking, the lullaby dying in her throat, before the soldiers could reach her. Evan forced himself up, groaning with pain. He grabbed the metal rod from the ground and charged forward, striking one soldier across the helmet. Knocking him down, the second soldier turned to shoot, but Evan slammed into him with all his strength. The blast hit the ceiling instead, showering sparks across the room. "Run!" Evan shouted, his voice cracking. Liara hesitated for only a second, then turned toward the emergency tunnel at the back of the shelter. But the leader aimed his weapon at her, his voice cold as ice. "You cannot escape." Then something unexpected happened. The baby in Lyra's arms began to glow, a soft golden light that grew brighter and brighter. The soldiers froze, confused, unable to understand the sudden burst of energy. Liara gasped as warmth filled her arms. The baby's rare power was awakening, not as a weapon, but as a shield. The soldiers stepped back in fear, the leader raising his arm to block the light. Evan stared with wide eyes, stunned by the radiance filling the room. And Liara realized something. Her child was not helpless, not fragile, not doomed. She was powerful in ways no one had ever understood. And this was only the beginning. The golden light filled the shelter like a rising sun, warm and bright, pushing back the cold air that had poured in with the soldiers. Liara held her glowing baby close, trembling with shock and awe. The child's eyes opened for the first time in hours, shining with a soft, radiant light that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Evan stared from across the room, frozen in disbelief as the soldiers stumbled back in fear. The leader tried to shield himself, shouting commands that were swallowed by the light. The energy spreading from the baby was not violent, not destructive. It felt alive, gentle, protective, like a barrier made from pure warmth. The soldiers raised their weapons, but every blast dissolved before it reached them, melting into harmless sparks in the air. The leader's blue visor flickered, his armor malfunctioning under the strange energy. "Impossible," he growled. The child should not have awakened so early. Lyra's eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of hope she had not dared to feel. Her child, small, fragile, so close to death, was now glowing brighter than any star she had seen. She whispered the baby's name softly, a name she had never spoken aloud since the escape began. "Arin," she breathed. "My little star." The baby reached out a tiny, glowing hand, and the energy barrier expanded like a gentle wave. The soldiers staggered, losing balance as their weapons powered down and their armor lights flickered out one by one. They tried to retreat, but the golden barrier pushed them backward, slowly, carefully, like an invisible force guiding them out. Evan watched as the leader stumbled into the snow, shouting in anger, and then the metal door slammed shut, sealing them out completely. The glowing barrier faded, leaving only silence and the faint hum of the shelter's heating system returning. To life, Liara sank to her knees, holding her child close, sobbing quietly from the weight of everything she had survived. Evan hurried to her side, dropping the bent metal rod he had been using as a weapon. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice full of worry and awe. Liara nodded slowly, wiping tears with trembling fingers. "She saved us," she whispered. "My baby saved us." Evan knelt next to them, staring at the now quiet child whose glow slowly dimmed to a soft, peaceful flicker. "She's strong," he said gently. "Stronger than anyone realized." Liara looked at Evan, gratitude shining in her eyes. "You protected us," she whispered. "Without you, I would have died in the snow." Evan shook his head, embarrassed but touched. "I just did what was right," he said quietly. "Anyone would have helped." Liara gave a small smile through her tears. "No," she said softly, "not anyone." They stayed there for a long moment, letting the peace settle over them. Outside, the storm slowly weakened, the wind whispering over the ridge like a lullaby of the world calming down. Evan finally stood and went to check the shelter door, making sure no soldiers remained nearby. The leader and his men were gone, their tracks already fading into the snow. For the first time since the night began, the world outside felt strangely peaceful. Liara sat on the bed, rocking her baby gently, Feeling warmth return to both their bodies and hearts, Evan returned to her side with 2 steaming cups of warm fluid, offering one with a soft smile. She took it gratefully, sipping it slowly as her body relaxed. The baby slept peacefully, her tiny hand glowing faintly with leftover energy. Liara caressed the child's cheek with a gentle finger. "She belongs to no council, no army," Liara whispered. "She will grow with freedom." Vaven sat on the floor beside the bed, leaning against the metal wall. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. "No one will find you again." Liara looked at him with soft eyes. "You risked everything for us," she said. "Why?" Evan shrugged slightly. "I saw a mother and a child in danger," he said simply. "I couldn't walk away." Liara felt her heart warm at his words. Humans were different, she thought, unpredictable, but filled with a strange kind of kindness. Her world had forgotten. She looked down at her sleeping baby, then back at Evan. "You saved us," she whispered again. "Not just from the storm, but from despair." Evan smiled. Looking at the child, "She's special," he said. "But that doesn't change the fact that she's still just a baby who needs love and safety." Liara nodded, tears forming again, but these tears were gentle, warm, full of relief instead of fear. Hours passed and dawn finally broke, sending soft light across the frozen world outside. The storm clouds parted, revealing a calm sky that looked new, untouched, full of promise. Liara stood at the window, holding her baby as the first rays of morning touched the land. Beside her, Evan stood quietly, watching the horizon with hope. "This is the beginning," Liara said softly. "A new life," Evan nodded. "And you won't face it alone," he said. Liara looked at him, her heart full in the darkest storm. She had sung her child a final lullaby, believing it would be their last moments. But then a human's footsteps had changed everything forever. And now, with the dawn rising, Liara realized something powerful. She and her baby were no longer running. They were finally safe, finally home. Asterisk. The golden light filled the shelter like a rising sun, warm and bright, pushing back the cold air that had poured in with the soldiers. Liara held her glowing baby close, trembling with shock and awe. The child's eyes opened for the first time in hours, shining with a soft, radiant light that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Evan stared from across the room, frozen in disbelief as the soldiers stumbled back in fear. The leader tried to shield himself, shouting commands that were swallowed by the light. The energy spreading from the baby was not violent, not destructive. It felt alive, gentle, protective, like a barrier made from pure warmth. The soldiers raised their weapons, but every blast dissolved before it reached them, melting into harmless sparks in the air. The leader's blue visor flickered, his armor malfunctioning under the strange energy. "Impossible," he growled. "The child should not have awakened so early." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of hope she had not dared to feel. Her child, small, fragile, so close to death, was now glowing brighter than any star she had seen. She whispered the baby's name softly, a name she had never spoken aloud since the escape began. "Arin," she breathed. "My little star." The baby reached out a tiny, glowing hand, and the energy barrier expanded like a gentle wave. The soldiers staggered, losing balance as their weapons powered down and their armor lights flickered out one by one. They tried to retreat, but the golden barrier pushed them backward, slowly, carefully, like an invisible force guiding them out. Evan watched as the leader stumbled into the snow, shouting in anger, and then the metal door slammed shut, sealing them out completely. The glowing barrier faded, leaving only silence and the faint hum of the shelter's heating system returning to life. Liara sank to her knees, holding her child close, sobbing quietly from the weight of everything she had survived. Evan hurried to her side, dropping the bent metal rod he had been using as a weapon. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice full of worry and awe. Liara nodded slowly, wiping tears with trembling fingers. "She saved us," she whispered. My baby saved us. Evan knelt next to them, staring at the now quiet child whose glow slowly dimmed to a soft, peaceful flicker. She's strong, he said gently. Stronger than anyone realized. Liara looked at Evan, gratitude shining in her eyes. You protected us, she whispered. Without you, I would have died in the snow. Evan shook his head, embarrassed but touched. I just did what was right, he said quietly. Anyone would have helped. Liara gave a small smile through her tears. No, she said softly. Not anyone. They stayed there for a long moment, letting the peace settle over them. Outside, the storm slowly weakened, the wind whispering over the ridge like a lullaby of the world calming down. Evan finally stood and went to check the shelter door, making sure no soldiers remained nearby. The leader and his men were gone, their tracks already fading into the snow. For the first time since the night began, the world outside felt strangely peaceful. Liara sat on the bed, rocking her baby gently. Feeling warmth return to both their bodies and hearts, Evan returned to her side with 2 steaming cups of warm fluid, offering one with a soft smile. She took it gratefully, sipping it slowly as her body relaxed. The baby slept peacefully, her tiny hand glowing faintly with leftover energy. Liara caressed the child's cheek with a gentle finger. She belongs to no council, no army, Liara whispered. She will grow with freedom. Vane sat on the floor beside the bed, leaning against the metal wall. You can stay here as long as you need, he said. No one will find you again. Liara looked at him with soft eyes. You risked everything for us, she said. Why? Evan shrugged slightly. I saw a mother and a child in danger, he said simply. I couldn't walk away. Liara felt her heart warm at his words. Humans were different, she thought, unpredictable, but filled with a strange kind of kindness. Her world had forgotten. She looked down at her sleeping baby, then back at Evan. You saved us, she whispered again. Not just from the storm, but from despair. Evan smiled. Looking at the child, she's special, he said. But that doesn't change the fact that she's still just a baby who needs love and safety. Liara nodded, tears forming again, but these tears were gentle, warm, full of relief instead of fear. Hours passed and dawn finally broke, sending soft light across the frozen world outside. The storm clouds parted, revealing a calm sky that looked new, untouched, full of promise. Liara stood at the window, holding her baby as the first rays of morning touched the land. Beside her, Evan stood quietly, watching the horizon with hope. This is the beginning, Liara said softly. A new life, Evan nodded. And you won't face it alone, he said. Liara looked at him, her heart full in the darkest storm. She had sung her child a final lullaby, believing it would be their last moments. But then a human's footsteps had changed everything forever. And now, with the dawn rising, Liara realized something powerful. She and her baby were no longer running. They were finally safe, finally home.